So there's a concept called data gravity. It suggests that the more data is collected, the more that data gets used, the greater its pull, and the more significant is its impact. People see the value that the data is providing, and they want more. So they pile on more, other data sets, other uses, other extrapolations. At the same time, as digitization continues, the data collected is expanding quadratically. There was about 2 zettabytes in 2010 globally, 30-fold increase up to 2020, and its projections for another 30-fold increase to 1,800 zettabytes by 2030. If we're sticking with the data gravity metaphor, that's a lot of mass. And like anything with too much mass, it risks collapsing in on itself. And like any object with sufficient mass, the bigger the amount of data, the greater the scale of it, the harder it is to use, the harder it is to access. So what do we wind up with? We have something everyone thinks they want, more data, and the very fact that they keep generating more of it is going to end up being self-defeating. So why does this matter? For organizations and companies, it is a huge issue. The fact is that the world is complex, and it requires complex interpretation. We need to garner insights from increasingly complicated data interactions if we're going to figure out how we have cause and effect, or more importantly, the solutions to solve some of our most intractable problems to confront, from logistics to healthcare, from energy generation to energy distribution. Fortunately, there is a way to navigate today's event horizon, or at least to transcend it. I call it the F to C paradigm. So formalization leads to composability, which enables collaboration. The canonical example is that I want to optimize for something. So the simplest form of that is a trigger. The simplest example would be, as soon as the price of the security is less than the 200-day moving average, buy. I have implicit knowledge about my website. I want Google Analytics to tell me the visitor is a 50-year-old male and then serve him an ad for dad jokes and New Balance sneakers. So this is something computers are really good at, this optimization. They can interpret with one person in this way. They can then interpret for billions. You can interact with one person, but you cannot interact with billions. But your computer can. Formalization, in effect, it reduces the mass of the data, the scale of it, without requiring that we eliminate the value that the data provides. So the same data gravity, but with less mass. So with sufficient abstraction with this formalization, we then get to the other C. So formalization to composability, F to C. Composability is just determining the whole from the sum of its parts. So I'll give an example of what that means. So it's a train system. So where a train can only grow to be a couple kilometers long before you need a new train, the train system, by contrast, can expand infinitely in a two-dimensional space at any time. That's composability. So another example is cells in our body. Each of the cells that make up Eric compose in a way that builds itself for an increasingly complex whole. So train systems versus trains and cells. That's composability. F to C. The Industrial Revolution itself was composable, in a sense, kind of an emergent compositional system, because we needed to specify increasingly specific descriptions for how machines interact. Semiconductors are a modern expression of composability. So in our lifetimes, we went from having a little piece of silicon with three little pins sticking out, a transistor, to chips with millions of these things. That composability was only possible because of formalization. Formalization to composability. Data isn't just a language. It's multiple languages. And as such, we have different syntaxes, different cultural connotations, different colloquialisms. Translating between these languages is never about a one-to-one substitution. It's about formalizing the rules of grammar and semantics, of course, in a way that allows something thought through in one linguistic system to make sense when presented in another. It's a sort of grammatology of data. It's complexity without brute force. And so all of this enables new, incredibly valuable forms of collaboration and insight, F to C, while being less expensive and more productive than brute force systems in terms of time, in terms of money. So think of a commercial airplane where the engineers of the engine, the wing, and the fuselage all have different versions, different uses for the term vibration. This is a life-critical context. When they compose, it's important to know, did those variables of vibration cancel out each other, or were they additive? That is, do we have zero vibration or catastrophic levels of vibration? So right now, the solution is to integrate, test, and then, just to be sure, over-engineer. The results of these increasingly complex systems that all of you are managing has increased time, increased resources, and also a less responsive system in the end. See, as data gravity increases and the integrations proliferate, the risk of these catastrophic failures for that system increases. And it does so quadratically. So this technical debt introduces a sustained risk of failure. It's a structural fragility into the apps and services that we need. So what does this look like? In a non-digital world, it looks like the power grid shutting down in my country, in Texas, and in the United States. It looks like the water no longer being drinkable in the southern part of the United States, in Jackson, Mississippi. In a purely digital world, it looks like Mitsui Bank in Japan failing to provide account access, even cash machine access, after a database upgrade. So as we become more and more reliant on these data-driven technologies, we have to figure out ways to reduce this technical debt and take away that mass without compromising the insights that we all want the data to produce.